complicated and long migration processes, or maybe why some species of sea turtles are slowly going extinct, or maybe why some species of sea turtles are slowly going extinct. You may have not thought of these things before, but you probably heard from your local law enforcement that you shouldn't drive at night, especially in areas with hazardous wildlife signs in the side of the road. Hello everyone, I am your host, Abby Revel, a Nation's Capital Girl Scout, bringing you this video today to help investigate what light pollution is. Wildlife is crucial to our ecosystem and our way of living, which is why we need to protect it. Although light pollution is not a popular topic, it is the basis for why certain rules and regulations are set to protect animals who are nocturnal, such as bats and owls. To truly understand this, we must first understand what light pollution is. This is why I'm going to be joined by Anne Ueda, as Light Pollution Ambassador of Dark Skies, to help explain what light pollution is.
What is Blue Ridge Wildlife Center?
So we are a full-service nonprofit wildlife hospital, which means that we take in all native wildlife to Virginia. So that could be anything from white-footed mice to bald eagles to, American robins to foxes. And the purpose is to take in any injured, ill, or orphaned wildlife with the purpose of getting them back released into the wild. We also do education programs so that we can educate the community on how to prevent these issues to begin with. So we have about 18 or so non-releasable ambassador animals that we use in educational programming to talk to people and give them sort of an ambassador for their wild species. As well as research, which we use to further the knowledge of information on wildlife and how to better treat them, how to better track them, how to better hopefully manage them or protect them through like laws and things like that.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for that information. A lot of animals are affected by light pollution. Which animals are most affected by light pollution?
So from what I understand, I know birds are affected a lot by light pollution, mostly because there are a lot of birds that are migratory and they rely on the stars and the moon because they fly at night, they migrate at night mostly to navigate where they're going, right? So birds have this innate sense to migrate south, certain birds. They use the stars, they use the moon to sort of navigate where they are, how far they're going. And as the stars are moving and the moon is moving in the sky, that's kind of directing them where they're going. Unfortunately, in areas, so like really populated cities or just areas that have a lot of light pollution, those birds can then lose sight of the stars and moon, which can then affect, which direction they're going. They might get distracted and think that the light coming from below them instead of above them, they're, turned off. They might go towards the light. And in big cases, serious cases, like in really big cities like Chicago and New York City, they can actually get trapped in these light traps where they fly down into the city. There's all this light happening. And now not only is there light, but there's light being reflected off of buildings and windows. And they get very disoriented because what they're seeing, they don't understand that it's glass. They don't understand it's a building. They just see light and trees and tree branches and sky, and they try to fly towards it and they hit those windows. And that can really, obviously, if it kills them, they're no longer migrating, or it can injure them, and put them at worse risk to predation. If you look at a Wild Bird Fund in New York City as a rehab there, they take thousands of migratory songbirds every fall and spring just from window strikes. So obviously songbirds and other birds are affected by light pollution. You also have issues. I know like sea turtles can be affected by light pollution. So a lot of researchers, if they're going out to like check nests or check on adults, they'll use red light because the red light they don't really associate with like actual light. They don't see it as well. Because if they use cooler light like blue light, that can actually distract them. And instead of hatching turtles or adult turtles going towards the moon and towards the sea, they might go in the opposite direction and go inland, which they're not supposed to do, right? So that messes all of that up. there's also issues with bats. Bats can be triggered by light pollution or the lack of light thereof to
Oh.
signal it's time to come out, it's time to start feeding and foraging. A lot of bats are very active at dusk. So as it's starting to get darker, if all of a sudden you have lights that automatically turn on, that could actually keep them inside their roosts for longer, which can cause problems where most bugs are really active right at dusk and dawn. So if they're waiting longer until after dusk, until it's really dark to come out, they're missing a lot of food opportunities. So that could impact, can they feed their babies? Can they feed themselves? It can prevent them from leaving the roost at all, or disturb roosts where, it might be winter time where there's lights and now the bats are waking up and it's too cold. They can't forage. They have to find somewhere else. So that can have a lot of impact on bats, which are really important to the environment. And then obviously lights can affect like insect populations, which is then in turn going to affect all of those other animals that are not eating them, right? It's distracting the bugs. They're kind of in this sort of overstimulated state where they're not foraging as well. They might not survive after spending all that time circling the lights. You see all those moths flocking to the lamps and stuff like that. That's time that they're not spending foraging or breeding or doing the things that they should be. And so now all of their predators over that, if the insect populations aren't doing well, then everything that eats those bugs aren't going to do well either. There's a lot of things that we, see as normal as like, street lights and stuff like that, but is actually having some pretty serious impacts on the native world around us.
Wow, I did not know a lot of that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I knew like birds and sea turtles were most affected because they rely on light for their migration patterns and, traveling to the sea where they belong, but I did not know bats and insects were affected.
Yeah. I was doing a little bit of research before and I found out that even mountain lions, where there are areas where it's really brightly lit, the mountain lions won't come out and cross in those really well lit areas because number one, it puts them at risk, but also they're used to like staying hidden while they're hunting. They're staying hidden from us because it's more safe for them. So not only do you have like roadways and highways that are these like barriers for them to move around, but even just areas that are really well and like brightly lit, they're also not able to cross those unless they're like absolutely desperate. So yeah, I learned a few things in looking this up and just kind of making sure I had all my information, but I was like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought.
Yeah. I know at certain times of the year, it is especially important to time when you release birds. Why is it so important to people to be wary of the times when birds migrate? I think you've already answered it, but if you could maybe answer it a little bit further.
Yeah. So obviously with migration and understanding when that's happening in spring and fall, it can kind of make people more aware that if they find a bird on the ground outside of a building or outside of a glass window, that that bird absolutely needs help. Sometimes it can get confusing because people think the size of the bird determines their age. So they might find a very small, like golden crowned kinglet, and they only weigh like 8 grams or so. And they're like they think it's a baby bird. And they're like, oh, well, baby birds, they can't fly sometimes when they're out of the nest. So I should leave it alone, which in some cases is great. But for a golden crowned kinglet, that's as big as they get. That's an adult bird. So understanding kind of when you should be seeing baby birds and when you shouldn't. In our area, we're only seeing golden crowned kinglets in the wintertime and in fall migration. So if you find a golden crowned kinglet and it's not flying, it is not a baby bird. But also knowing too is obviously a lot of people like to put like bird feeders and stuff out. And they think that during migration or in the summer that we need to feed birds, or even over the winter, people will be like, they need food because there's no food out here. In our area now, we hardly ever get snow, which is very sad. But there's lots of food resources available. Bird feeders, you do not need to feed birds. It is entirely for us, not for the birds. and they can actually spread more disease between birds because it's congregating all those birds together in an unnatural way. Knowing when birds are here too, especially is important for us because say we get a lot of common whippoorwills or nighthawks in fall migration and spring. We generally aren't going to have them here all winter. So if we get one who hits a window or is struck by a car in September, October, now we have to think about how long is this going to take this bird to recover from? Can we get them out in time to make migration, right? Because they're eating insects and things like that, and there's no bugs here in the winter. Yep. So if now it's going to be a 2-month long recovery for this bird, now we have to think, okay, we're going to have to hold this bird all winter long, because if we try to release them, they're not going to survive. They're not going to have enough food to fuel getting all the way south where they need to go. So there's a lot of migratory birds that we do see that we have to keep that in mind. Chimney swifts are a big one. Most of our chimney swifts in this area are gone and migrated out by like late September. And the fun thing about chimney swifts is you can't just release them and hope they know where they're going. They have to be released with a flock because the adults will come get them. They all get together and they show the babies where they're going. So if you just release chimney swifts without a flock, they'll go south, but they won't know where all of the roosts are so that they can stop and rest on their way south. So they'll basically just be kind of sitting ducks as they fly south. They're not going to have anywhere to stop. They're going to be vulnerable. They're probably going to get eaten by something, or they're just going to run out of energy and not make it all the way. So for chimney swifts, that's a really big one specific to that species. But overall, just knowing and understanding that like you have these large groups of birds moving during spring and summer, or spring and fall. So if you find a bird that is just like sitting in the middle of an urban area as well, we get a lot of woodcocks that hit windows, and people will just take pictures and be like, this silly looking bird is in downtown Leesburg or like downtown Alexandria. And they're like, how silly is that? And it's like, that's not silly. That is a concussed bird that needs help. Like, please don't leave them. Yeah, in the middle of an urban area. So kind of letting people know, like, when that's happening, they can sort of be on the lookout for like weird, birds that you're like, this is a weird behavior. Like, should they be here? We should probably call and find out, because it's probably a no, they should not be there. And they likely need some sort of medical attention or professional help before just leaving them out or trying to release them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, that really opened my eyes.
Thank you, Anne. We see now how the Dark Skies Organization has implemented its mission to protect darkness in our night sky. If you want to help continue make a brighter future for both humans and wildlife, hit that like button and let us know in the comments below if light pollution has affected your area and lifestyle.